Stories-Redditors who worked in retail, what has to be the most "are you serious" moment ever. Story 1 watched a man carrying 6 bottles of red wine simply drop all 6 bottles on the ground, shattering them, and walk out of the store, khaki stained bright red like a savage business casual warlord. My assumption was that it was an accident, and he was horribly embarrassed and just left. I'd like to believe that it was an intentional piece of performance art, because it was the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed. Story 2, I worked at a fast food place for a while, and had this one regular who always had something to complain about. The worst was that no matter what, our fries were never fresh. Whenever we saw her, we'd drop fresh fries, just so she wouldn't complain about them. She'd order, and we'd give her fries directly from the fryer, and she'd tell us they weren't fresh. My manager got them from her, walked to the back, and brought her the exact same container and apologized. The lady said these are perfect, and went about her day. Story 3, so I used to work in HM located on 5th Avenue in NYC. So, as you can imagine, we would get from all over the world. One day, I hear over our radio a frantic call for the porter to come to the ladies' fitting room. Turns out a woman decided to take it in the fitting room and use some shirts to wipe herself. The real "are you serious" moment was that she continued shopping through the store casually. Story 4, I worked at Sears and watched this guy with big brass walk in, wave, pick up a TV we had overstock. I spider wraps out on the floor and walk back out. Alarm didn't even go off. Story 5, I hear "excuse me" and look up from stocking the milk, which I'm standing in front of. "Could you tell me where your milk is?" I almost didn't answer her. Milk is basically the whole aisle, and I had it in my hands. Story 6, I worked in an Old Navy for quite a few years. We weren't particularly known for our thorough loss prevention. So, some people had gotten quite comfortable openly stealing in front of employees. Eventually, loss prevention turned over to new management and kicked into overdrive. They had squads of people who would team up in stores to attempt to catch a few people, so the word would spread and would see a few less shoplifters. They were running this operation at a store in a low-income area, when suddenly a Caucasian lady in her mid-50s came in and started shoving random things in her purse with little regard to her surroundings, shoes and tops hanging halfway out of her purse. When she tried to leave, loss prevention stopped her at the door and informed her that they had notified the police and she needed to remain there until they arrived. She immediately said, "I have to go to the bathroom." And as they tried to tell her that wasn't an option, she started screaming, "I am pooping." And herself, they escorted her to the bathroom. Since it's a single room without windows and she has no chance to escape, they figured this would be an opportunity for her to clean herself up, and this was mostly for the police, so they wouldn't have to soak the car in bleach afterwards. After the police arrived, they realized she had been in the room for a while and wouldn't respond or unlock the door. Management opened the door with a key and found the woman covered in her own, which she has also rubbed all over the walls, ceiling, and floor. People are nuts. I've got a million stories. Edit. Wow. This was one of my first posts, and I really wasn't expecting this much of a response. They'll post some more stories over in the subreddit later. Thanks, everyone. Also, I did not have to clean it up, but I have similar stories where I did that I might post. Story 7, one time, before HDTV and flat TVs, but still since cable-ready TVs, a lady came into Walmart with a huge floor model console TV, the kind that had no remote, and wanted to return it and get her money back. She started yelling at me when I told her I wasn't accepting the return as she had no receipt and the TV was obviously over 15 years old, and she demanded to speak with the manager. So I paged a manager who told her basically the same thing. She then started demanding to speak with Sam. We were like, "Sam who?" "Sam Walton, your boss," she screams. My manager had about enough of this lattice BS and told her, "Well, ma'am, we have a wide selection of shovel and lawn garden, so you can go dig 'em up." Story 8, guy walks into Tractor Supply, steals bolt cutters off of the shelf, then walks to the side door and cuts the lock where 2 of his buddies have been placing items near the door. They pile everything in this tiny car and just drive off. They were caught later that day for trying to steal for another store in the same plaza. Story 9, I worked at McDonald's when I was 16 to 17. My first day in the grill area training during lunch rush, this guy comes in through drive-thru and orders 100 burgers, 50 plain, 50 with cheese. I was like, WTF, man. I was told it was a lunch truck guy that would order them. At the time, we had a 49-cent burger and 59-cent cheeseburger day, then dress them out and sell them for like $2 to $3 a piece to his customers. Story 10, I didn't work there, but was behind this woman in line at my tiny town's dollar store type place. She was buying a couple cans of that milk supplement for kittens, thought it was actual cat milk, and was buying it to drink herself in some sort of fancy food party for one she was throwing for herself. Yeah, I done went to Kroger's and got me some fancy cheese, and I had to leave the line because I was on the verge of bursting into laughter at the look on the cashier's face. Story 11. I work overnight stock at Walmart. One night, I'm overstocking the spam section, and this big guy walks up, big, I'm talking 300 to 400 pounds big. I continue minding my own business, putting things on the shelves, and he speaks, "Excuse me, sir, I am so sorry that you have to see this." And then he just pauses, confused and concerned on equal levels. I stand up and turn around to look at him, wondering what exactly he plans on doing. After staring at me for about a good 20 seconds, no exaggeration, he reaches over and then grabs a ton of spam. More containers of spam than I ever thought anybody should ever need in their lifetime, let alone one shopping trip. That one is an exaggeration. Sue me. With his cart fully loaded with spam, he turns around and walks away, leaving a huge empty spot on the shelves that I'd been filling up. I managed to get out a quick, "Have a nice day," before he escaped around the corner. It was certainly an experience. Story 12. Definitely the time when I was moaned at by a customer for not being on a very obviously unmanned checkout despite there being a very obvious long line, because I was very obviously on the phone for an ambulance for a customer who had very obviously collapsed and was now very obviously bleeding to death. Story 13. Cashiering in a grocery store. Customer walks up the lane next to me and unloads their cart by handing things to me over the divider. She didn't notice anything amiss until she needed to pay. Walked past a family picking out ice cream, and they looked up and told me they had left a leaky case of soda on the floor several aisles back. They must have dropped it, then realized it was leaking. There was soda everywhere, and they just left it in the middle of the floor and went on shopping. Handed a woman a pen to write her check with. She turned it over 5 times, pressed on the cap like it was a click pen, unscrewed the body so the ink will almost fell off. She finally handed it back, asking how it worked. I silently pulled off the cap and handed it back. She said, "Well, how that's different. Customer at self-checkout spends 5 minutes trying to scan an item. Yells at me that the machine is broken. I walk over and press start. Voila. I fixed it." Woman insisted that I was overcharging her for an item. It was supposed to be 2 for $5, and I was charging her $2.50. Neither I nor my manager could persuade her. At last night, a customer asked if he could borrow a pair of reading glasses for the night, then bring them back tomorrow, if he promised to leave the tags on. Edit 2. I completely forgot to consider the insane things people say to me. I asked a woman once how her weekend went. She replied with, "Well, I have to take care of my mother and my mother-in-law full-time, because they're on hospice and I can't work because I have spinal meningitis and the pain is too bad." This weekend, I had to drive my sister to 3 different hospitals to see specialists for her cerebral palsy and visit my uncle who has eye cancer. Now here it's important to note that this woman was buying nothing but 16 gallons of distilled water. That's why I'm buying this water. I use it to make a tea that cures cancer. I can see you have freckles, so you're going to get skin cancer someday. Let me write down a recipe for you. It really works. My uncle was supposed to die a year ago, but hasn't because I'm making this tea. I had an old man use pennies as a segue into a rant about how Canada was going to collapse because of refugees and socialism, and we should behead all Muslims and burn down the Middle East. I had a man tell me that I was only happy and smiling because I wasn't old enough to realize that life is nothing but pain and suffering and waiting to die. Cancer tea lady came back and told me she had adopted an 11-year-old dog with 15 puppies that would have been put down without her because it had cancer, but she had cured it with her tea and was not suffering taking care of the 15 puppies. She came back again buying 10 trays of chicken that she claimed she couldn't touch because she was allergic to all meat and it would make her skin rot. Story 14. A guy came in who I have never encountered in my life. Served him, and all was well. 3 hours after my shift, a notification pops up on my phone. This guy found my Instagram and my Snapchat and added me. What's creepy is the only thing he knew about me was my first name. That was it. Also, I only recently moved to the area and know nobody here. Creep me out for sure. Story 15. Awesome. Finally something I can answer. I work at Macy's in the women's shoes department. Our customer base mainly buys clearance items and rarely spends more than $40. Every day I watch as customer after customer asks if they can use coupons, get an extra off of the price, or any discount possible. Now, one customer took the cake over every other one. She came to me and asked for the mate to 18 clearance shoes. As I work off commission, and this was a pretty large sale, I basically ran around the stockroom to gather these shoes. I brought them all out neatly stacked in their boxes and rang them up at the register for her, and her total came to $236. This is where it went south. She asked if she could use her 20 off coupon. Now, normally, yeah, you can use that coupon, but in this day we were having a sale. All clearance shoes were marked down $80 and were roughly $10 to $20 per pair. So coupons were prohibited. She then screamed at me until I called my manager, like calling me every name in the book, telling me I'm an idiot, that I shouldn't be allowed to work there because I must be retarded, everything. My manager finally came, and when she explained that coupons weren't allowed for this particular sale, the woman bought all 18 pairs for $236, but made someone else ring it up so I wouldn't make commission on the sale. Little did she know the other salesperson rang it up using my ID number. Dumb. Story 16, I worked at a store as a pharmacy tech, and it was very slow. People would often come up to me and ask if I knew where non-pharmacy was, and I always just pointed them toward customer service. One day, this very old woman, had to be 85 with a strong southern accent, comes up to the counter. "Hello, ma'am. How can I help you today? Where's the collagen? I think a skincare product, maybe the health section." So I walk out to the aisles and start looking with her collagen. "Well, I don't think we carry pure collagen." "Are you looking for a skincare product or supplement?" She just stares at me, looks up and down the aisle at all the lotions, then back at me. "Collagen. Where's the collagen?" She repeats. At this point, I'm getting frustrated. I'm rummaging through these shelves of creams and lotions and coming up with nothing. So I walk over to the pharmacist and consult with him. He recommends sending her to customer service, but I decide to push through. Keep in mind, it's been about 10 minutes. I walk back over to her and start scouring the vitamin supplement section and finally locate some kind of powder collagen. Here I announce as I hand her the bottle. She looks at the bottle, then at me, and says, "Where's the collagen? I'm making soup collagen broth." Story 17, I used to work at a grocery store as a bagger. This guy said he wanted his milk in a bag, and he has a lot of stuff. So when I finally got around to the milk cost prioritizing and all that jazz, I wanted to confirm that's what he said. It just slipped my mind, so I asked again. He proceeded to yell so loud that the next two lanes got quiet, and they were all staring at what was going on. "Are you stupid? You have hearing problems. Where's your manager? They should fire you for being so stupid. I already said I wanted it in the bag. For sake, I just want to make people happy." Of course, the manager was working that day, so he didn't say a word. Even though he watched it go down, I at least had the sympathy of the checker from the other two lanes. Edit, I forgot to add that in a weird event of real-life comedy, this guy answered the phone afterward, and I assume it was his wife or something because he said, "Oh, how's my little sweet pea?" And I was just like, Story 18, worked at a Target and have literally 1,000 stories, but the one that sticks out to me was one I wasn't actually present for. Gentleman walked in one day with a blender, sat down in our Starbucks, and proceeded to make himself a smoothie. I can't emphasize enough that this is retail. This is hardly the weirdest thing that's ever happened to us. The floor leader on duty asks if he needs anything, is looking for anything. He smiles and says, "No, thank you," very polite. When he's finished, he takes the blender, goes into the bathroom, and proceeds to pour the smoothie onto his head and begin to shave in a Target bathroom, which admittedly are already a little akin to the Twilight Zone, the Australia on the world map of Target, if you will. Anyway, a male employee was sent in to ask what exactly he was doing, and apparently, the man replied with what, "It's not like I'm doing anything illegal." "What are you going to do, call the cops?" Yes, apparently, I guess several other male employees were called up to guard the door before anyone else could get in before police arrived. Don't know exactly what happened to the guy, but I'm glad he's getting used out of his blender. Story 19, you'd be surprised how many women would rather slip a raw steak into their purse's pants than pay whatever sale price they're going for. And this is in the upscale supermarket as well. Story 20, I work in a butcher shop. Today, a lady came in looking for lean turkey mince as she was on a new diet. She said her daughter made up her diet plan and is weighing her every day. I asked her how is she finding it so far, and she said it's really tough. This is going to be the first thing I've eaten in 2 days. Her daughter, woman, bought a shed. I asked her loading bay number, and she said she hadn't driven. Asked her if she needed the number of a man with a van or something. She said her husband could carry it. I stared at her and said, "Very slowly, madam. It is a building." She insisted that I was being ridiculous and demanded we bring it up so her middle-aged, slightly chubby husband could carry it out the store as they only lived about 10 minutes walk away. We brought it up with extreme difficulty, and she asked me, "What's that thing?" I said, "That's your shed, madam. There's no way Jeff is carrying that." Oddly, she decided to pay the money to have it delivered. Story 21, a lady asked me, "Where are the eggs?" She was literally looking at me, and they were directly behind me. Obviously 2 shelves wide, and with a sign hanging from the side of the shelf that said eggs. Story 22, I worked at Suncoast Video Retailer during the early 2000s, and some dude kept calling me for weeks asking me if the movie Chuo Man had come out on DVD. He had a pretty thick Hispanic accent to his English. I consider myself a film buff, and I had never heard of a movie called Chuo Man. Every time he called, I would look up Chuo Man in the computer database, and of course nothing would come out. I would ask him if he got the title wrong. Perhaps it was The Wicker Man, and he was like, nah, dude, it's Chuo Man. I saw a commercial that it was coming out on DVD. It got to the point where I just thought the guy was trolling me. One day the guy came into the store in person. He came up to the register and was like, you guys finally got it, huh? While holding up a DVD, it was True Romance. Are you serious, brah? Story 23, not really retail. But when I worked at Five Guys, someone asked me if our French fries were made from real potatoes despite signs and 50 pounds bags of potatoes being in front of her face. Story 24, not quite retail. But I used to work valet at a popular hotel. There's a prestigious theater across the street. And sometimes people from the show concert would valet with us. We hated this because they all came and left at the same time and never tipped. This particular night was a Rick Ross concert. Every car that came in for the concert smelled like weed and had a bottle of Rose or Patron. When the concert ended, we had a rush of cars. There was a short white dude with dreads who was waiting a while. I asked him if he already gave his ticket to someone, and he said he lost it. He spoke entirely in slang. His eyes were red and he was up. I kind of remembered when he came in and asked him if he drove a black Escalade. He said no, it was white. I poured through the logs and only saw 3 Escalades, all black. I asked him again, and he said it was white. He started panicking, asking if we lost his car. I reassured him we would find it. He started crying. He went to the hotel manager and told them the situation. While I told the manager I had it under control, the guy called the cops. I had 3 guys run through the 2 garages we used. No white Escalades. At some point, the guy found his ticket. It was a black Escalade. When his car came, he tipped one and left before the cops came. His buddy drove. My manager called me, and I explained the situation to him. The real ballsy move for the dreaded was when he called my boss the next day. He said we stole his wife's laptop. My boss told him to himself. One of my co-workers wanted to give the cops the car info and tell them they were likely impaired. Story 25, I was once berated over 10 minutes because of the fat content of ham. A lady was adamant that ham never had fat when I was a kid and wanted to know when they started adding all the fat into HAM. I can't eat anything anymore. She must have said that like 15 times. I was like, lady, they really only taught me how to slice it. Story 26, worked in a local fruit market as a teenager. Packed this lattice grocery bag and went to put it in her shopping trolley when she started screaming at me about what a horrible young girl I was and don't I have any compassion, etc., etc. Turns out she had her pet rabbit sitting in the bottom of the trolley wrapped in a fur coat, no less. I was trying to crush her to death by being nice and loading up her groceries for her. I ended up crying while the next lady in line consoled me. Story 27, I worked at a really popular clothing store for about 5 to 4 years. I have plenty of bad customer experiences, but one always sticks out in my mind. Everything was going normally one busy Saturday until I walked into a very large puddle. Obviously, a puddle about a yard wide isn't supposed to be in the middle of a clothing store. So I run and go tell my manager that there's a leak somewhere. What I hadn't noticed before was how the puddle was mysteriously coming from a woman and her 2 to 3-year-old son. I thought, great, a big puddle of apple juice. That's going to be sticky. As we walk up to tell the woman, we soon see the entire front of her kid's shorts are soaking wet. We put 2 and 2 together and realized this toddler had pissed himself and all over our hardwood floors. My manager is livid at this point and confronts the lady. She and her son were Hispanic, so she acted like she couldn't speak English. Even though she was able to have a small conversation when she walked into the store as I greeted her, this didn't deter my manager. He was able to get his point across through basic signing, even as she still acted like she didn't know what was going on. The most awkward and annoying part was how she didn't leave. She just kept shopping like nothing ever happened and basically destroying every display that had clothes she was interested in. There would be a nice clean table with perfectly folded clothes, and she would go and dig through a whole stack to look at one shirt in the size she wanted only to just toss back onto the mess she had made. Luckily, my manager asked her to leave after this, and she was able to understand that because she left right away. He also didn't make me clean up which was awesome, and he cleaned it up himself. Overall 0-10. Retail really sucks sometimes. TLDR, Lattice pissed all over the floor. Edit grammar. Story 28. I grew up in a big city until I was 15, and we moved to a small town. I got a job at the grocery store, which wasn't very busy. One day I'm working with one other teenage girl, and a guy comes between our 2 lanes, looks at the girl I'm working with, and says, no way I'm going to have a brown girl ring through my groceries. That was the first time I ever met a racist person, never witnessed anything like this in the city. So it really boggled my mind. I told him I couldn't help him, so he would have to go to a different store, and I left my till. Story 29. So I work at David's Bridal, and recently we have had the kookiest of the kooky come into the store. This story happened while I was at work, but it was mainly with my manager. A few weeks ago, a mom and a dad came in looking for a post-wedding preservation kit for their daughter's gown. My manager rings them up for the preservation kit and starts getting the dress ready to box when the dad mentions that a pin had been left in the hem after alterations we do outs in store, and it nicked the bride on the wedding day. That is an honest mistake that happens every once in a blue moon. So my manager apologizes. Then, out of nowhere, the mom starts bawling and talking soap opera, throw yourself on the ground bawling. So, of course, everyone in the store is staring at this woman. Once she has everyone's attention, she yells, "What if my daughter has the AIDS? I don't know what kind of people you have working in the back. What are you going to do for us if she's infected?" All while cried her eyes out, my manager responded with, "Ma'am, I'm not a medical professional, but I'm pretty sure that AIDS is not able to live outside the body." This goes back and forth for about 15 minutes until finally the mom throws her hands up in the air and just says, "We'll be in touch," and she walks out. After she left, my manager went and hunted down her alterations ticket, and honey never got her hem done. The only thing she had done was adding bra cups into the dress. We never heard from the mom again. TLDR, mom comes in saying we gave her daughter AIDS. Story 30, work at a restaurant. Recently had a customer I've never heard of before call up and ask for a reservation. Sure, what day and time? Today in 10 minutes. Okay, also, tell the kitchen I'm coming and to prioritize my table's food. I'm a regular there. People will know who I am. Needless to say, I didn't tell the kitchen. Also, I know our important regulars. He wasn't one of them. ID never even seen the guy before. I worked in a supermarket for about a year and a half. I've had some crackers. The best one by far was a man walking up to me and demanding I show him fruit. I asked him what specific kind of fruit, as they're stored in different parts of the store, and he just replied with fruit. So I take him to the part of the store where most of the fruit is kept and asked him if that was going to be okay. He then asked me for fruit in bags. I explained that he can put the fruit into the fruit bags to take to the till. He then decides that none of this fruit is the fruit he is looking for. After what felt like weeks of trying to coax what fruit he was looking for out of him, walking him up and down the fruit and veg aisles, 3 different managers had to get involved after he started yelling at me. Because I didn't know where the fruit was, he cussed us all out and walked away. 20 minutes later, he comes marching up to me, shoves a bag of raisins in my face, screams fruit, and walks away. TLDR, guy spent about half an hour screaming fruit at various staff members. He was looking for raisins. Story 31. I had a male customer come up behind me and start rubbing my shoulders. I'd spoken to him earlier about products and had gone on about how much he liked my hair. I did the creepy arm touch thing, so ID moved on to other tasks, and I was horrified when he followed me and put his hands on me. Not cool, man. Story 32. I worked at Whole Foods. So that should tell you something right there. One, we had a brand of soda that had a really good blood orange flavor. We suggested it to a lady who had a different flavor. She was like, "Oh, that sounds way too witchcrafty for me." Okay, 2. I was a cashier. I was once cornered in the meat department by a concerned customer asking how the chickens were slaughtered. She then listed off several different ways. She was this sweet 60-year-old lady that I never expected to ask, "You know what? You should go talk to the meat counter." They have an entire book. I also have lots of other stories because Whole Foods attracts interesting people sometimes. Edit Farmer, he would buy about 20 pounds of potatoes a week for a potato diet. On the potato diet, you eat between 3 and 5 pounds of weight every day. I've heard you lose a lot of weight. Farmer, 1 week after starting, I've lost 4 pounds on the potato diet so far. All he ate was plain potato. Most boring life ever. Superstitious old lady asking people if they want a receipt is bad karma. Just give everyone a receipt. A lady who was having the most stressful birthday of her life. Lady, I left my dog in the car, and now people are going to be mad? Nothing is private these days. There's way too much technology. It's my birthday, and I'm stressed out. Me try to calm her down. Well, try and do something exciting for your birthday. Lady, people should be their individual selves and not do what corporations think they should do. People are hilarious. Story 33. This is the story of when I thought ID get fired and the store would get sued. I was working lawn garden at Lowe's and was helping a gentleman load some product from a pallet into his truck. The pallet was running empty, and the customer stepped on a broken part with a nail sticking up. He starts screaming in pain and hopping on his other leg. While hopping around, he bangs his shin on a flat blue cart. He then switches legs, holding his shin and hopping on his foot for a few hops before realizing. He swears and switches legs again. I'm standing transfixed. I don't know what to do to help or mitigate the situation. I'm fearing for my job and a huge lawsuit. Suddenly, he stops jumping, stares at me, and calmly states, "If I wasn't so high right now, that really would have hurt." He proceeds to get in his truck and drive away, leaving me dumbstruck. Edit, there is also the time a lady picked a fight with guy and then wanted me to walk her to the car because she was afraid he'd attack her. Crazy lady story. Another time a customer went white as a ghost and pointed at my sock, which was completely soaked with blood. Sock story. Dog growled at a cashier that was a male to female transgender. Owner says that's strange. He usually likes girls, cashier, and I exchange glances and try really hard not to laugh while customer awkwardly looks back and forth confused. The time coworkers asked me to get a tricky pallet out of top stock as I was better on the forklift. However, they neglected to tell me they had already tried and broken the pallet. I picked it up and started to back out when the entire thing tilted back towards me. I came to a stop, and so did it. I shifted to drive, and the transmission clunked into place, which was enough to send an entire pallet of firewood bundles raining down on me. I was extremely glad that all the pieces were bigger than the slats at the top of the fork truck. I basically just sat there and let the dust settle. Coworkers sheepishly peeked around the corner and asked if I was okay. They had also destroyed one of the shed displays. Manager came out while we were cleaning and asked what happened. I told him. He yelled at the other two for being dangerous and left. Never gave me a drug test or had to fill out a report. Idiot coworkers started going off on how crazy it was that the 6-year-old daughter could translate for her deaf father. I mean, yelling, "Oh my God, she knows sign language, but she's so little." Another coworker, and I told him he was an idiot, and it was perfectly normal. He yelled over us going on and on. Father was confused about the interaction. Daughter was disgusted. I apologized to the daughter and the father and took them to another aisle while telling the coworker he's lucky they don't sue us. Story 34. As a cart boy. A guy throws his trash into a cart while he's standing right in front of a trash can. Worst part is when I went back to campus college. I told my friend who was part of the janitorial staff. Instead of sympathy, he just shouted, "It's your job." I felt like dumping flour in a room he had to clean and saying, "What's the problem? It's your job." Story 35. I work in a pharmacy that sold a body wash called goat soap. A customer approached me with a bottle of it and asked, "Can this be used on people too?" I was absolutely blindsided and had no clue what to say. Story 36. When a client drove 25 minutes back to the store for 30 price match adjustment. When a client threatened to take us to court because we would not give him a free 20 part for his Perkis, 7 years AGO. Client telling me they saw the product sold at 20 less than what my lowest price was. Proceeds to show me proof. Sale price someone said they got on a forum in a diff country and currency. If I did match their price, it would have been about $5,000 over what our price was from the exchange client complaining the tree they bought died. Actually, this happened 2 times in the same summer. 2 different clients. First one didn't seem to know you have to water plant trees, so yeah, it died. Second planted it with a plastic base on it. That also isn't ideal. I can go on for hours. Edit O. And the drunk guy who came in to take a nap on one of our sofas in the showroom even took off his shoes and everything, was rather polite to be honest, just drunk as. Story 37. I work in produce. Someone came into the produce section and starting bitching to me that we didn't have milk on display in the produce section. We ended up calling someone from grocery, and he came back and said she complained the entire walk over to the dairy section. And when she got there, she ended up not buying any milk because it isn't fresh enough. Edit. Some context, the produce department is across the store from dairy. It's a straight shot, but we often have displays for other departments that block the view. We get questions as to where things are all the time, and normally ID just direct her to where she should go, but she was incredibly unreasonable, demanding I bring her there at the time I was alone, and it was busy as I called someone from grocery to show her the way. He said that her words were, "It isn't fresh enough. You're all so unhelpful," and she walked away promptly. Story 38. I serve a guy once who smiled, handed over the 3 DVDs in his hand. Just a normal work encounter. As I turned around to pick the DVDs from the wall behind me, I heard a noise like a bowling ball hitting the floor, and one of my nearby colleagues shout, "He's bleeding. Call an ambulance." I peered over my counter to see the guy I was serving passed out on the floor with blood pouring from his head. We had a couple of girls who were first aides, and they ran over, closed the area off so they could tend to the poor guy. There was blood everywhere. I had literally no idea what had happened. One of my colleagues told me the guy had just straight up collapsed and passed out, cracking his head open as he hit the deck. The paramedics turned up and took over from the first aiders, putting him on a stretcher, etc. We had to close the store down temporarily. Some of you are probably reading this and thinking, well, where's the "are you serious" moment? That will be the sheer amount of people stepping over this poor guy, over the blood puddle, shouting that they had been queuing for ages and wanted their DVDs, etc. We were being too slow, taking too long, just being really rude for the sake of it. It was pretty obvious what was going on. That was the reason why we had to close the store for a few hours. There was a massive pile of blood to deal with, and people were completely oblivious. Would close my counter down and put barriers up, and it wasn't stopping people at all. It was at that point that I realized people were rude and inconsiderate as a whole, and I didn't want to work in retail anymore. This was 2004. I'm still working retail, not through choice, but through necessity. And yes, people are still rude, probably more so now.